RRIF versus RRSP. You want to know the difference between the RRSP and the RRIF? I know it can be confusing, so here's a communication expert explaining it all to you.
We are different people. We speak different languages. We have different faces, but inside, we are same, but different, but still same.
Okay, now that we got that out of the way, David Skylark is not wrong in that video. In many ways, the RRSP and the RRIF are same. Okay, we have a 5-video series that was planned to break down the RRSP meltdown, and I realized that this needed to be included, so that officially makes this series grow. That's a good thing. So as we get more questions, we will add subtopics just like this. So this is now officially part of what you need to understand before you consider melting down your RRSP. In this video, I'll cover the basics about the RRIF, the similarities and the differences between the RRSP and the RRIF, when you must convert the RRSP into a RRIF, the minimum withdrawal schedule, as well as RRIF withdrawal strategies that you may have heard of. I'll also answer the question if you should convert your RRSP sooner. Now, what are the benefits of converting to a RRIF sooner, as well as what you need to consider as a downside if you do so? That's all coming up. Stay tuned. So let's talk about the basics first. Before you get fancy with the meltdown and other decumulation strategies, you should understand the basics. Now, if you're already familiar with the RRSP, you know the main benefits, right? It has tax-deferred growth, but we have a more detailed video in the links below that will actually explain the RRSP better. All right, so much of the assets that are eligible for the RRSP are also eligible for the RRIF. Your staples: stocks, bonds, cash, GICs, mutual funds, ETFs, private equity pools, REITs, even segregated funds, and so on. But the key difference is their primary purpose. Think of the RRSP as the accumulation account in your wealth building, while the RRIF is your spending account in your decumulation. It's in the name: Registered Retirement Savings Plan for building your savings. Now, while you're working, your contributions give you a tax deduction, and no income taxes are paid until you make withdrawals. The Registered Retirement Income Fund is for spending. It's in the decumulation stage. Once you convert your RRSP into a RRIF, you will have to meet the minimum required distributions or withdrawals. You also cannot contribute into a RRIF directly. You can only transfer funds into it. So when do you need to convert your RRSP into a RRIF? Most people know that you're mandated to convert your RRSP into a RRIF eventually, and that has to happen on or before the end of the year you turn 71. You cannot have an RRSP after that. Your withdrawals start the year after your conversion. So if I was born January 1st, 1953, turning 71 this year, I must transfer all of my RRSPs on or before December 31st, 2024. You're aware of that mandated conversion, but there are actually 4 ways to deal with the RRSP before you turn 71. Cash it is option 1. 2, use the RRSP funds to buy an annuity. Number 3 is this video, convert it into a RRIF. And number 4 is a smart blend of all 3. I'll tell you why option 1 isn't the most ideal option for most people. If you have $1 million balance in your RRSP and you decided to cash all of it, you would have to report all of that into your taxable income, and it will be astronomical. If you're in Alberta, you will pay $440,729 in taxes, and that sucks. And it gets even worse. If you're in Ontario, you bring that up to $492,853. In Quebec, it's $498,000. So, no bueno for most people. Option 2 would be a different video altogether, where you use your funds to buy a pension. That's simply what an annuity is, but that requires more nuance, so let's skip that for now. So what is the minimum I need to draw from my RRIF? The minimum withdrawal schedule or the rate depends on your age. Before 71, the minimum is calculated with this formula, 1/90 minus your age. So at 65, your minimum RRIF withdrawal is 4%. Once you are 71, that formula stops working and you just get a mandated schedule, and that's presented in front of you right now. See, that minimum is then multiplied by the ending balance of your RRIF from the prior year. So if you're 75 and you open the year with $1 million in your RRIF, you can take a look at this table right now. For a 75-year-old, you need to withdraw 5.82% or $58,200 before this year ends. I just want to take this one step further. I'm recording this in October 19th, 2024. So if Jane was born December 30th, 1948, she is now 75 years old. But let's say Jane has a friend named Joe. Joe was born January 30th, 1949. He is also 75 years old based on today's age. However, the RRIF calculations and the prescribed factors are reviewed based on your age as you enter the year, January 1st. So January 1st this year, Jane was already 75, but Joe was not. So Joe would use the prescribed factor for a 74-year-old to calculate his minimums this year. So how can you change your withdrawals? Is there anything that you can control around this? Can you use your partner's age for RRIF withdrawals? Now, withdrawals based on your spouse's age is possible. That is an option. If you have a younger spouse, you can use their age to determine the minimum prescribed factor for you. So if on January 1st this year, you were 75 years old, but your partner is 65, you can choose to use 4% as a prescribed withdrawal versus the 5.82 if it was based on your age. The advantage here is it allows you to keep more of your money in the RRIF growing tax-deferred for a longer period of time. We'll make a different video to see if this strategy actually makes sense. Is there a limit to my RRIF withdrawals? No. There's no limit to how much you can withdraw from the RRIF. However, please remember that with any withdrawal beyond the required minimum will attract regular RSP withholding taxes. I'll address that in more detail later. However, it's worth noting that you can withdraw all of it. There's no one stopping you from doing that, but all of these withdrawals will also be added to your taxable income. I already talked about liquidating a massive RSP all at once. Even if it wasn't a RRIF and you withdrew it all at the same time, this will create the same impact. Should I convert my RRIF sooner, before you're mandated to do so at 71? I will walk you through 5 reasons to convert the RRIF early, as well as 3 reasons to take a second look before you do this. Because all of this, of course, depends on your strategy. Let me first give you the 5 reasons why it may make sense for you to convert your RSP into a RRIF earlier. Number 1, the ability to split your income with your spouse if you are 65. Now, if you haven't done a good job equalizing your assets with your partner, unlike RSP withdrawals, RRIF is eligible for pension income splitting. That means you get to share the tax burden on the same withdrawal. And that's not possible with an RSP. You need to have a little bit of foresight to do that and use a spousal RSP. However, that still isn't something you can change right now if you're already 65. The second reason to convert your RSP to RRIFs early is so that you can save yourself some money on withdrawal fees. Most financial institutions charge an RSP withdrawal fee or a deregistration fee. I've seen this typically at $25 to $50 per withdrawal. Depending on how often you withdraw per year, it really isn't that big of a deal. I've also heard clients say that they've been hit with $150 to $200 fees. Perhaps those are from full withdrawals. But just be careful. If you're already planning to make withdrawals anyway, why would you pay these fees? The RRIF does not attract these withdrawals because it's already designed for decumulation. The third reason to convert your RSP sooner is having more control with your RSP balances. By taking your RRIF sooner, let's say at 65, you can effectively draw down your RRIF balances over 7 extra years. spreading some of your income over this period. And that could mean a few things. Could lead to lower minimum withdrawals later on when you don't really need it. If you're going to spend money anyway early in your retirement, why not take it from the RRIF? Number 4, the minimum RRIF withdrawals are not subject to tax withholdings. Financial institutions are required to withhold taxes on RRSP withdrawals, and it's based on the size of the total withdrawal. 10% on the first $5,000, 20% from $5,001 to $15,000, and withdrawals that are larger than $15,000 will get a 30% withholding attached to it. Quebec has a different schedule, 19% on the first $5,000, 24% on $5,000 to $15,000, and 29% on withdrawals that are larger than $15,000. This could get confusing, so let's just do this by walking you through 2 scenarios. In scenario A, Joe is 65 years old as of January 1st this year. He has $1 million in his RRSPs, and he decides to draw $50,000. Because that's larger than $15,000, his financial institution will enforce a 30% withholding or $15,000, leaving him with a net of $35,000 to spend after this withdrawal. Now, if this happens to you, depending on your other sources of income, it's likely you won't have a 30% effective tax rate in retirement, so you'll end up with a refund and you will likely get a significant amount back at tax time. If you have no personal discipline, you may end up owing taxes from your withdrawals next year, and you might not have the cash. That's the whole theory behind this withholding, and it might make sense. My hope is that if you're watching a video like this, you're smart enough to account for taxes when you're making withdrawals. So let's go back to Joe. Let's say that this is Joe's only source of income this year. His effective tax rate is 12.45%, and he'll pay $6,224. Here's my issue with this. What if Joe did this January 1st this year and he doesn't file taxes until March the following year? Maybe the refund doesn't even hit his bank account until April. That is a 15-month interest-free loan to the government. He lent Ottawa $8,776. Remember, his tax due was only $6,224, and they withheld $15,000. If he was able to earn 5% on that difference, that's foregoing an equivalent of around $500. That is not ideal. I'd rather him earn that money himself. The next issue is, what if Joe really needs the money? I think that's the real problem. What if Joe needed net $50,000, maybe because that's his lifestyle target, or because there's a specific expense that he really needs to meet? He is now $15,000 short. He would have to withdraw $71,429 to meet the net $50,000 after withholding. This would potentially push Joe into a higher tax bracket. So this thing that was supposed to help him manage his taxes, the withholding, actually increases his tax due. His tax on this withdrawal is $13,241. His effective tax rate goes up from 12.45% to 18.54%. Okay, let's move on to scenario B. Exact same circumstances. The only difference is Joe converts that RSP into a RRIF the prior year. At 65, there is a 4% prescribed minimum withdrawal, so that's $40,000. Any amount below this will not attract any withholding requirements. So if he withdraws $50,000 as planned, only the $10,000 and excess from the minimum will be subjected to withholding taxes. So that is $10,000, and that will attract 20% or $2,000. If we recreate the same constraint where we pretend that he needs $50,000 net, he would only need to withdraw $52,500. If there is no other source of income, he would stay under the first tax bracket in Alberta. His effective tax rate is 12.33%, and he'll pay $6,474. If you're paying attention, you'll realize that's a lower rate than the RRSP withdrawal, and you might be wondering, ¿por qué? There's one more thing that I want to point out. I am not saying in any way that in the last comparison, Joe will only pay $2,000 in taxes. That had to do specifically with the withholding taxes if you are planning something like that. That does not mean that's all he pays. Based on the $50,000 of income with limited credits and no other sources of income, he would still need to pay about $8,900 in taxes. So if you're doing something like this for yourself and you're making withdrawals, be mindful of what your net effective tax rate is actually going to be, and you can actually elect to have that as your withholding. As you can see here, this is 15.22%. Not as high as the 30% that's being mandated if it was a pure RRSP withdrawal, but it's also quite a bit higher than the $2,000 withholding imposed on the 10 grand. So we want to make sure that you're understanding that the withholding taxes and the net income taxes at the end of the year when you're making your filings is not the same thing. So if Joe did this and all they withheld was the 2 grand, he would be owing that $6,900 in April. So we want to make sure that you're aware of that. That's explained in point number 5. The 5th reason to convert your RRSP into a RRIF early is the pension income credit. The pension income credit is a $2,000 credit that the RRIF is eligible for, while the RRSP is not. Just to show you, for Joe, this is a $469 tax savings because without the tax credit, his tax would be $6,943 if he made that withdrawal. Same $52,500 from the RRSP. Are you surprised that I actually quantified that? Fantastic! Subscribe then. Follow me. Like this video. If you want to take this relationship further, you can even book a consultation and see if we can help you. Spoiler alert.
60% of the time, it works every time.
That doesn't make sense.
Well,
probably. Now, just a little bit of extra sauce for you. Let's add more seasoning to this. If you're not yet ready to convert all of your RRSP into a RRIF, and you're at least 65, you can always do a partial conversion of at least $2,000 per year, and you will get this credit. What are you doing? Still not subscribed? Fine. Even more sauce. Even if your spouse does not have an RRSP or a RRIF, you can convert $4,000 of your own RRSP and then elect for pension income split, and you both get the credits. Oh my gosh. Did he just combo number 1 and number 5? Of course, that's how you close a loop. Let's move on to the next topic, which is why converting your RRSP to a RRIF early may be a bad idea. More specifically, if you don't have a proper strategy. Reason number 1, when you convert your RRSP into a RRIF, the minimum needs to be met every single year, even if the markets and your portfolio is down. So if you're not confident with your overall investment drawdown strategy, just be careful, because your minimum is based on the balance of your RRIF January 1st. And let's say that there's a freak event where everybody's coughing, you have to wear a mask, and you're not allowed to leave your home. And maybe your portfolio is down 15 to 20%. It doesn't matter. It's based on the balance at the beginning of the year. It doesn't matter if the portfolio is down. So be careful with your timing and asset allocation. Be sure if you're planning to meet large minimum RRIF withdrawals that your RRIF actually has some cash or fixed income in it that will have stable value for you to meet these withdrawals. Reason number 2 to defer the RRIF conversion. Your funds may get better returns in the RRIF. See, deferring the RRSP to RRIF conversions is 7 extra years from 65 to 72 where your funds are growing absolutely without any interruption. If you're a savvy investor or you're comfortable maintaining your equity allocation for longer even as you enter retirement, by converting it sooner, you're introducing taxes to a very tax-efficient growth. Now, a lot of that money is going to be taxed better if it was inside the RRIF. Even if you reinvested the proceeds, you could potentially have a lower net after-tax return if you did this sooner. The third reason to wait before you convert your RSP into a RRIF is that you may already have other income sources. You may already have a pension at work. Maybe you're working past 65. The withdrawals just get added on top of that and increases your taxable income. If you do this, you must consider how you could potentially reduce or cancel out your other sources of income. This is why early RRIF withdrawals or meltdowns are done in conjunction to delaying the CPP, perhaps delaying the OAS, or maybe both. If you're a business owner, maybe you hold back compensation from your business and you just retain that into your holdco instead and you invest that within that entity. If you have rentals, maybe you consider looking at the CCA to eliminate some of this rental income. Now, all of these items have secondary impacts that you need to consider. So if you're not willing to dig deep enough to understand those, then this might not be worth doing aside from the pension income credit. My hope is this video has been helpful. I just want to warn you that even if your name is Joe or Jane, you are not getting advice in this video. This is just for illustrations. I kept that illustration simple, where in almost every scenario, they have zero other sources of income. Your situation will likely be different. If you want to apply for a consult, we have an office here in Calgary located at 909 17th Avenue. So that's in the Lower Mount Royal area. If you want to meet us in person, which we would prefer if you're from the city, however, you do have a choice. Once you select your consultation, you can look at two options, either meeting us in person or via Zoom. If you want to learn more about the process, simply check out our fee-for-service financial planning section, and you'll learn why so many others have found this process so valuable in their retirement planning. I'd love to meet with you in person. However, we work with clients nationwide, so we're very comfortable with Zoom, and when we meet, it'll look exactly just like this. Now, my promise is that my sense of humor goes from 0 to dad in 60 seconds or less. So if nothing else, learn more about your personal financial preferences. Come meet me for the bad jokes. Until next time, happy planning, God bless you, and konnichiwa.